Welcome everybody, this is SharePoint Framework and JavaScript special intro scoop. This is the bi-weekly sync for this community call, which happens bi-weekly on Thursdays at 7 a.m. Pacific time. And typically this call is actually being led by Patrick Rogers, who's unfortunately had a thing this morning, so he can't actually join. So I needed to step in. Not a massive deal, because typically I would have a section in this call as well. Now, on the agenda of today, if I can get the slides moving, there we go. We have a quick engineering update on SharePoint Framework. So I'm going to talk about a few things which seem to be landing on SharePoint Framework 1.10 and also the progress around that one in general. We'll also have updates on the PnP JS, Office 365 CLI, SPFx Reusable Controls, and PnP Yeoman generator. So our open source tooling helping you to be more productive when you're doing development in the SharePoint Framework or in the SharePoint Online world in general. A lot of this stuff actually is more for SharePoint Online rather than SharePoint 2019, because SharePoint 2019 actually is quite old already, which you might not think like that, but in the Microsoft world and in the engineering world, it's almost 1.5 years old, because the latest and greatest is always on SharePoint Online, and then the on-premises is following way behind of SharePoint Online with the releases, because we don't control your server, so we can't update your server without your permissions. So that's why SharePoint Online, we can update that, and that's getting a new version in every single week. Think about that. So if there's a new version actually getting released as we speak in on-premises as well. Point from Gary, SharePoint 2019 is ancient in the SPFx terms. That is true. Unfortunately, it is a logistical challenge for keeping that also up to date. And we understand that there's a growing demand for potentially making updates there. But let's not actually concentrate that on that one precisely on this call. We can talk about that one maybe in the Q&A section more. Now, we will have two different call demos. Ramin Ahmadi from Content and Code is here. He's actually showing a hacky way to override list experience with a custom web part. And this is something which actually I intentionally wanted to have a demo, because I want to have a discussion about this approach. What is the benefit and what is the downside of that approach, because people might be doing this already. We are also looking into native out-of-the-box ways of overriding the out-of-the-box list experience potentially with the web part, and that's work that's being led by Jax. Jax is one of the PMs in my team. Then we have David Warner talking about SharePoint library components and simultaneous parallel development of them, and how you can actually do that. So really cool looking demos both. So I'm pretty sure that you will be impressed. Now, I didn't introduce myself, by the way, when we started. So my name is Vesa Yeoman, and I'm a principal program manager in the SharePoint development platform team, or OneDrive SharePoint development platform team. So my team owns everything related on SharePoint development. API documentation, SharePoint framework, farm solutions, feature framework, that's all on my table as well, or our team's table. So pretty wide a range of responsibilities. I've been around for a long time, so if you have any questions on farm solutions, I can help with those as well. Please don't use them anymore. Now, opportunities to participate in PnP SPFx and special interest group. We have a few different ways of being part of this community. You can volunteer to do a demo. We are actually getting a lot of people now signing up for the demos based on the samples they're submitting, or based on their own samples in a GitHub, or a demo something which they did for their customer or their company, which they're unallowed to share as a code, but we can still have a demo of that. So people are signing up for those demos. You can definitely do demos around PnP JS, Office 365 CLI, SPFx Reusable Controls, and Yeoman generator, and those are more than welcome. All of the demos are actually recorded as part of this video, and they're also being released as an individual videos in the SharePoint Dev YouTube channel, and then promoted with our social media tag. So if you want to have more visibility for yourself or your company, these are actually great opportunities for that. So if you're an MVP and you need to get more additional exposure, or if you want to be an MVP, these are brilliant opportunities to actually gain some visibility in the community. You can definitely contribute in GitHub. Report issues, submit pull requests, help with issues and questions. That's definitely also allowed as well. So you can actually help other people in the issues and questions as well, because to be honest, we do not scale. This thing is growing out of hands, and so we definitely would need help more and more from the community to help each other as well. And then the main thing always to remember, please give us feedback. If something is missing from these calls, if we're talking too much, if we're talking too little, if we're missing some relevant things, let us know. We can actually fix that if we know what's actually broken. So don't just be a stranger and complain somewhere without us knowing. Complain in a way that we know, so we can improve. And also positive feedback is definitely welcome. We human beings are quite bad actually on that one, because we tend to always react on negative things or remember to acknowledge negative things. But providing positive feedback for the people who are contributing, definitely welcome as well. Now, we have 3 different main assets. We talked about, there was already a question around the videos. All of the community calls are getting recorded. They are in the AKMS SPDev videos address, or you can do www.youtube.com/SharePoint PnP. Either way, you will land on the same location. We have our official SharePoint dev documentation at the AKMS SP Dev Docs, and that's getting updated on daily basis. And then we have the SharePoint dev issue list, which is there to help you if you're running into developer or extensibility related issues. Something you're running an issue in SharePoint framework or something, please report that, and then you can ping people or mention potentially people which it works and it doesn't work, because then again, if you start mentioning people in every single issue what you're getting, it gets to be too noisy, and then we don't have any ways of following up on things. Sooner or later, somebody is going to have a look on your issue, and then we're going to triage that internally in engineering, and then we're going to address hopefully that issue as fast as possible. Also, tech community, like mentioned by Bo Cameron, there's a lot of information already in the tech community around the questions and answers as well, so don't ignore the tech community locations. Now, quick updates on the SharePoint framework. So a few updates on this side of the house from the SharePoint engineering. So that would be me. Well, we'll be talking about the majority of the call, except for the demo. So just to recap, SharePoint Framework 1.9.1 is available. This is the latest version. And by the way, just to clarify that one, because it seems to be coming up all the time, even though you would be doing development of SharePoint 2019, install this version. And then as part of the creation of your solution, you choose a target environment to be SharePoint 2019 plus forward. And that will give you the right solution structure, the right versions and packages and everything else. And then when you package that package or solution, it will work without any issues in SharePoint 2019. Now, SharePoint 1.9.1 is now out, like mentioned, like 2 weeks ago. So have a look on what's available. Library components is now G8, so that's available. And today we're going to talk about what's in the next version and when is it coming out. I did a quick calculation earlier today for internal communications that we have had already 15 actual releases of SharePoint framework after the initial release back in February 2017. That is actually quite a big number. And we're moving more and more to this monthly release cycle, so you would know beforehand when the new version is coming and what's coming as part of that version. And that's going to then increase the reliability, and we can improve our internal processes based on that as well. Now, before I go here, I just need to, on Nanchan's comment, this SP 2019 equals or is greater than 1.4.0, which is true and not true. So please, when you create anything on SharePoint 2019, install SharePoint Framework 1.9.1 or the latest version, and then create the solution by selecting SharePoint 2019 forward as the option, and voila, you will have the right version. The version is a combination of multiple things. So saying that it's a 1.4 or 1.4.1 isn't technically precise. So that's why please use always the latest version. Now, few notes on the usage. If you're following me in the Twitter, as an example, you noticed that I was kind of I was super excited earlier today because we broke one pretty unbelievable limit, which you can actually see in here, but I can't give you the exact number. So on the left side, usage per user, you can see that the latest weeks we've been again skyrocketing. So it did slow down slightly during summer, which is understandable. When the summer is in the northern hemisphere, it actually impacts on the amount of people working and doing development and deployments. And then typically in here, late August, September timeframe, it starts again growing. The thing is, though, this time it started growing really fast. So we jump really like 20% already from the early August, or 10% in early August, but the numbers are already insanely big, and then we still jump 10% in 1 month, which is impressive. And that's on the left side of the charts. It broke one line in the top. It did broke that line actually Tuesday, Wednesday this week already. And if the growth is similar in the future, we have no idea where the limits are. This is really interesting to see how the growth is continuing. Now, the reason why we don't give you an exact number, that's always being asked, is that if I would give you a number which is 28, you would ask, okay, what does that mean? And that's when it gets complicated. And the way we calculate usage in the Office 365 is not based on how many users are actually in a day doing something, or how many things, or how many people, or how many applications, or how many tenants something is happening. There's a slightly more complicated way how we calculate that as a standard way across Office 365. And that's to balance out, let's say, exceptions and all of that stuff. So even though you would get a number which is like 42, it wouldn't tell you anything. And that's why we don't want to actually give that number away. And we rather show you a chart and percentage growth, because that gives you an indication of where we are. So, but it's been a massive ride, and it seems to be now skyrocketing again, which is really interesting. Now, SharePoint developer roadmap, a few things which I updated on this slide today. So SharePoint 1.9 came out in August. The next version is 1.10. It is now planned to come out on September. And again, everything is subject to change, but it's good that you have some visibility on things. We're looking into getting to 1.10, a really important feature, which is and capability of allocating SharePoint Framework extension areas during the UI loading. So that means that if you are using a header or a footer, or in future other elements in the UI, they're not jumping or moving the UI after or as part of the loading. So basically, you can allocate a blocks in the header area, which says this is an area which I'm going to render as a final step on the page rendering, and it's going to be 50 pixels, and that it's going to be allocated there, so it's not moving the page anymore as part of the loading of the page. So the flickering and the movement of the elements should be getting less and less, and that's something what people have been hoping to have as part of SharePoint Framework. And then the list subscriptions with SharePoint Framework, that's the second really big thing, which is around the fact that a web part or an extension can subscribe on a list event. So basically, let's say, hey, whenever there's a new items or changes or modifications in that list, let me know, and so I can re-render myself or react on those new things in the list and libraries on that side or on other sides of the tenant. That capability can now go to GA now that the API capabilities, the underlying API is also available. So that's really cool as well, because now quite often people have an intranet or whatever page hanging on their screen, but you can react the changes behind the scenes automatically, so you can really easily subscribe to these events. There have been a way to do that in the past as well, but that typically has required an Azure function or a quite complicated implementation, which requires a external processes running. Now we're heading to this where you can really easily do that using then SharePoint Framework. Now, other topics bubbling under Office add-ins with SharePoint Framework still getting done. It is moving. We do have a relatively big conference coming up later this year, which we might or might not announce something. But also we'll start with the preview in all of these things. Content security policies for crossing CSAM.NET standard. There is movement on this one. We are in progress of fixing our internal build processes, and that's going to then enable that to get to the preview status first, and then to the GA. Story for SharePoint Framework solution, that is getting movement as well. So we're really trying to make that happen as well. Additional content extensions for modern pages, we talked about that on an SPC. So there will be navigation overrides and navigation node overrides. There's some other elements which we're looking into doing as well, which we haven't yet announced, but really good movement there as well. App catalog deployment improvements, that's an ALM API improvements, also potentially in craft side of the house. And then we're looking into also having a new lookbook templates and a new provisioning service. And these are probably going to be announced to get to be available in the Ignite. The lookbook templates are really around making cool looking demo sites available for you. So basically making sure that whatever cool looking demo sites we use in Ignite or in our conference sessions as a Microsoft and our marketing, that kind of cool looking sites are available for you as well. So that's going to help on then you to maybe even start your intranet based on those sites. So really cool stuff. Now, MS Craft user insights. The following sites, followed sites API is coming. So there is a additional set of insights coming. And now if it's specific for some other areas on Microsoft Craft, I do not know because I'm from a OneDrive SharePoint side of the house. But I know that followed sites is moving from an API perspective, and that should be out relatively soon as well. And new placeholders are coming. I can't really disclose all of the details on that, but in the SPC, we talked about navigation overriding. We talked about navigation nodes overriding using an extensions, and those are being looked at. I can't promise an ETA for those either. PnP JS quickly in here. Like I said, Patrick isn't unfortunately in the call. 1.3.5 was released in August 16th, mainly issue fixes and some new features. The version 2.0 is being worked on. This is a open source initiative as well. So right now, Julie Turner from Roxys Consulting, Simon Ågren from Otherpoint, and David Warner from Catapult are helping around the coordination of that work. So if you're interested in contributing as part of the PnP JS V2 release, absolutely reach out to these persons or Patrick Rogers. But it is progressing and looking really promising as well. Office 365 CLI, there's a new beta version, version 2.0 beta available, which is including 3 new capabilities, listing organizational asset libraries, retrieving Microsoft Craft schema extensions, and enabling and disabling flows. So Office 365 CLI is a command line tool which can be used in any operating system in the world. So basically Linux or Mac OS or Windows. And that's really the key story why it exists. It started as a project by Waldek because he was unable to configure his DNS in the Apple machine without starting a VM, which had a Windows and then a Windows PowerShell. But CLI has been extending quite significantly after that. So it is widely being used also for example, giving you insights on what are the steps to upgrade your solution. If you move from a SharePoint framework previous version to the latest version, the CLI will give you the steps to make that happen. So really, really, really great tool. Now, SPFx reusable components, not a massive amount here. Progress, we do have quite a few pending community PRs. It's been a vacation period for Elio, who's actually the project lead, open source project lead for this one. But we're looking into getting back on track on addressing those pull requests and making everything available and moving forward. So that should happen by the next community call, so we should see additional movement in here. If you're not familiar with these controls, they really are there to increase your productivity. So you don't have to write a map control or a map tool or a charting tool. You just drag and drop basically, or use the code to get the control into your web part, and poof, it just magically works. Web part titles and placeholders and everything like that automatically available for you. So really cool stuff. SPFx Community Yeoman generator, which is the generator which extends the out-of-the-box Yeoman generator, but extends that with the new options and capabilities like Angular. And as part of the 1.9 release, it is now supporting Angular 6 and Angular 7. And that's actually pretty cool. It also has a native TypeScript support for 2.9, 3.0, 3.1, 3.2, 3.4, and 3.5. So you can actually select as part of the Yeoman scaffolding which version do you want to target, and the tool will get every single setting in right, so you can just concentrate on development. The native out-of-the-box Yeoman generator does not do that. It doesn't have an Angular support. It doesn't have a Vue support as an example. So really, really, really great extension, and it is using the out-of-the-box under the hood. So it extends that. So there's no risk of using this rather than the out-of-the-box one, which is coming from the Microsoft engineering. So definitely something to check out as well. But that's it from my side, pretty much online what I was planning to have. So 20 minutes of discussions and updating you where we're heading from an engineering side, and also a quick update on the open source projects. Ramin, you are hopefully in the call, right? We didn't double check on before we actually started the call. Awesome, you're there. So I think it's time to jump on your screen, do the demos, and then we can talk about what's the challenge of the demo, what you're doing as well. I want to call out before Ramin actually starts, this is not what we recommend to be done in production, but I think it's a worthwhile technology and a pattern to talk about. So take it away, and let's definitely talk about what we're seeing in the screen afterwards. Thank you.
Sure. So my name is Ramin Ahmadi. Hello, everybody. I'm working at Content and Code, and you can follow me on Twitter, GitHub, or my blog. And as you know, the idea of developing custom modern form is one of the top 3 user voice ideas, and hopefully we will be able to have them in the near future. And as Visa said, is not a recommended way of doing this. It will. I was really curious how I can, have something similar, so I can redirect my forms to different pages and basically have custom forms for different content types. So the only way to achieve that was, using a hacky way that I use jQuery to just, having custom code and binding them to on-click function of some elements that we will see in the code. So if I want to show you how it works, this is the list I created, and this is the common view sets button that I have here for defining our custom forms. If I click on that, it shows this panel that you can define your custom forms. Before that, I'm going to show you the pages that I created. So this is a display form page that I used this web part, React list form, that you can download it from the repository. It's already available. And also we have similar functionality for this page as an edit form. And I also use a Power Apps web part. So I added to this new page that's going to be our new form. So here you can select your content type, for example, web part. I'm going to, for display form, I enable it first, and I'm going to use this URL. I'm going to say new tab, and also there are some tokens available, so you can pass it as a query string parameters. For example, I'm going to say item ID equal to one of these token, which will be item ID. And you can save this. I'm going to have similar configuration for the edit forms. And the new form as current window. Okay, so if we just refresh the page, it should override all the functionality for the new form, edit, and display form. So if we click on web part, it just redirects to this page that we defined as our new form. So if I just add a new item here. Sorry guys, I don't know why this is being blacked out. So I just wanted to show you this is a new page. So if you go back to the page, there was some problem with the Power Apps form. So if we click on one of these items that has a web part content type. I click on edit. It just redirect the form, and here you can see that item ID passed to this page as a query string, and these are the fields that is being filled in this web part. And also, if I click on each item, it's going to open the display form in a really new page. But it doesn't affect the other content types. For example, we didn't touch the extension content type. So if we just click on edit, you can see the default form it just pop up. Or if we click on the extension here, it just use the default forms. Or you can open the display form as well. And so this is the demo about how it works. So let me just go through the code and show you how it's been done. There are some highlights that I want to show you. The first one is the assets that I have here. This is a list instance that's going to keep all the settings for each list. So you can use this command view sets in different lists and keep all the settings for that list. And when you add this app to a site collection, it's going to be created automatically, this list. And also we have this settings panel. So this is a Fabric UI panel that is responsible for adding or updating these configurations to that list that I mentioned before. And we also have a list service class that uses PnP JS to do the updates or adding the items or getting the content types from the list so you can select them from the panel. And here is the code that I just mentioned before. And as you know, as I mentioned before, and also Vesa mentioned, this is a really hacky way. So as you can see, I just use jQuery to bind the click event to each button. For example, edit, open, or new buttons. So we can redirect them to the pages that we define in the settings panel. So here in the redirect, we just check if it needs to be open in a new page or just a current page, current window, basically. And these are the tokens that are going to be replaced when the user just click on each button. So yeah, here is this sample, and hope you enjoyed that. And back to you, Wissam.
Thanks. Don't stop sharing anything. So let's talk about this slightly. So the whole point of this one is that you wanted to provide a custom editing, a viewing, and a new experience. And basically, what Ramin then did here is that he implemented an extension which we can use in a list level to configure where the user is redirected again if you click a new item or edit an item, and then a new page is where we have a web part which is reacting on those things, what's happening. Now, the challenge of actually making this this way, it does work, but it's not guaranteed that it will work tomorrow. And the reason for that one is that we're using that hacky JavaScript jQuery selection based on this DOM structure of the page. This is how would I put it? It is a classic way of extending and modifying SharePoint, also in a classic SharePoint experience. So you basically modify the DOM structure of the page. But the challenge of doing that is really the fact that when we change or release a new version of the list and libraries, we haven't actually given our developers and customers and partners an agreement that our UI would be an API, because it isn't. Because we cannot guarantee that the DOM structure and the DOM path, which is used in the jQuery for matching the edit button, or as an example, would be exactly the same in the new version of the list and libraries. And we can't guarantee that at this point. And that's why the sample also is saying clearly on the README that you should not do this in production. Now, and again, that we used to do that in a classic SharePoint by modifying the let's say a subsite creation or links and all of that stuff. And yes, there are solutions in the production for doing that. But the challenge of doing this, it is really the fact that we don't know if it's going to work tomorrow. For SharePoint framework extensions, which are the header and footer and the list view command sets and the exchange field customizers, we actually guarantee that regardless of the UI modifications, what we do, those extensions will work. And this shows a requirement for us to actually implement a custom list and custom view and custom editing experience also for lists, like Ramin was showing as well. Do you have, Ramin, by the way, the user voice entry somewhere? It is number 3 right now in the user voice for having an opportunity of modifying the list view. The user voice entry. Do you have the user voice entry somewhere close?
Yes.
There we go.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so you can easily find it using Bing or Google by using the title. But this is now number 3 in the user voice entries, and this is really around the fact that yes, you can use Power Apps and you can use Flow to modify, or Power Apps to modify the user experience. But the challenge of doing that is that it's, again, a new development environment, and then it has licensing implications. If you don't like those things, you would like to just override the list experience by providing a web part, which will take care of the editing and displaying and new form. So we're looking into that. It is actually it seems to be that it's quite likely that we will make that happen, but in the way that you override the whole list experience. So not bits and pieces of the list experience, the out-of-the-box one. Rather, you truly are able to have a web part which will say that, hey, this is taking ownership of this list, and then the web part will have an indication, is it an edit or new or display functionality. That sounds probably what it should be, and I'm looking forward on making that happen sooner or later. Again, I can't provide any ETA on any insights when, and maybe I can't even promise when we make that happen, but it is being discussed all the time.
Perfect.
Good. But until 10, still, if possible, don't do what Ramin is doing in this demo. But then again, if your customer, this is one of those things where when I was a consultant, then you need to figure out and you need to get clever. If your customer is saying that, well, if I can't make this happen, I will go to another provider and I will go to another platform. Well, that's not also what we want. So yes, it's a hacky way, definitely not a recommended way, definitely not a long-term way how it should be done. But maybe every now and then we need to make compromises. The world, unfortunately, is not black and white. So again, not recommended making this happen. Should not do this in production, but we can't block you for doing this from the production if that is truly required. So that's one of the reasons why we need to provide a similar capability out of the box as well. Good. I think that's it for Ramin from your side. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you helping
thank you.
on pointing out what I wanted to point out as well. So David, I think we're good for moving on your side. No point heading to the slides first.
Okay, great. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, audio is clear, crystal clear. And screen sharing works like, yeah, we can see that. It's insanely fast in Teams. It's just amazing.
It is pretty fast. It's very nice. Okay. All right. Thanks for letting me demo today. My name is David Warner. I'm an MVP, work for Catapult Systems, do a lot of logging and blogging, and love working with the community. So reach out if you have any questions or just want to collaborate. Today, I was going to demo on SharePoint library components, specifically a technique that I call simultaneous parallel development. So we'll start out with a brief overview of library components, just because we have a lot of new ones on, and some may not have been exposed to it yet. So we'll let them know exactly what it is and what its benefits are. And then we'll talk about how we can develop a library component and a web partner extension simultaneously in parallel. So we'll see how we will gulp serve both at the same time, port changes that are required, and then what those benefits are. And then we'll see an actual demo of it all. So what are library components? It is a SharePoint framework solution, as you can see here, that allows us to include all kinds of functionality in it, stuff that might otherwise be included in the web part or an external resource. And our web parts can then connect to it, or our extensions can connect to it, and it will only load once on a page, right? So imagine having some custom development code that you need for your organization, or you want to include PnP JS, because why wouldn't you? It's awesome. Or any other kind of functionality that you would want to include. And it is a SharePoint framework solution, so it still gets stored as an app in the app catalog, and it benefits in all the same ways. And you can access it from all of your web parts and extensions again, and it loads once on the page. So what exactly is simultaneous parallel development, and how can it be achieved? So obviously you gulp serve when you're doing SPFx development. That does not change here. You will do that with both your library component and your web part, your extension, but they both will by default spin up a server with localhost 4321. So there's a collision that could happen there. So we want to ensure there's no localhost port collisions between your solutions. And then, of course, the connection to our library component is based on the NPM link, right? So when we change the port for our library component, you may be thinking, well, wait a second, how is the workbench or any other component going to find it? We're used to working through that 4321 connection. But it's the NPM link and the magic behind that that makes all of this work and allows us to change that port and everything still function as expected. We'll see a demo of that, of course, and I'll include some links if you're not familiar with NPM link that will help you understand it a little bit more later. The benefit, of course, is that the task runner watches both and automatically rebuilds everything as we save. Which is fantastic, because are we really going to go do everything in a library component and know that it's perfectly developed and then switch over to our web part and only ever work in our web part from that point forward? Probably not. We're going to iterate back and forth, make changes, maybe correct some mistakes we might have made. So it's natural to want to go between both at the same time. So let's see what that looks like in a demo. So let me set the stage here. I've got VS Code on the left, and I've already got it open to a folder that includes both, excuse me, a library component and a web part. Now, I've already scaffolded these out, so we're not going to waste time doing that. And I've already done the NPM link to connect the library component to our global node modules, as well as the NPM link on our web part to connect it. So to the connect it to the library component. So the first thing we want to do is go ahead and gulp serve on our web part. And so we're not going to use a browser right this second. I've already got one up that we can reference later. And we see that spins up. We're doing our Webpack, and it should load pretty quickly. And there we go. We're ready to go. So now let's do the same thing on our library component. But this time, what we're going to see instead of the nice green local port opened is we're going to see some red alerts, right? If we scroll back up, address is already in use. Of course, naturally, that's because our web part is utilizing it, and we want it. That's how we interface with SharePoint through our web part or extension. So we'll go ahead and kill that. And truth is, that'll still work, but nobody likes red errors, and who knows what else might go wrong. We want it to be functional completely. So we're going to go ahead and cancel out of that, and we're going to go into our library component, specifically into config and serve.json. Now, this is the part that we want to change right there. It's using that port as we all know it to be 4321. And so we'll just change that to anything really that we know is not going to conflict with maybe something else running on our server or on our machine. So I'm just going to go ahead and save that as all fives. And now we'll go ahead and we will re-engage gulp serve with no browser. And we should see it working successfully. We see green, great, it's been spun up, everything is working, and we have our reload. So now let's see how this works for us in practicality when we're doing development. We'll go in and look at the source of our library component first. Simple, out of the box, it comes predefined and pre-created with a name, just returns the name. And so if we go into our web part, we open that up. Again, as I mentioned, I already included it and imported it, ran the NPM link, and I've already created the instance of it. So if I come down here and do library component instance dot, we see that name right there. We see it's available to us, right? But as we're going through and making changes, let's go back to our library component. And I'm going to go ahead and add another function here. And this function is just some predefined content that we'll take a look at in a moment. All right, just returns some HTML that we want to use, and I've clicked save, and now you can see the task runner has reloaded. It's very quick, happens very fast. And so now when we go back to our web part, I can go ahead and now we see our another method is there. PnP Parker is now there for us. That was what the function name was called, right? So we see that right there. And so now instantaneously, didn't have to re-gulp, didn't have to reserve, didn't have to rebuild the library component. It automatically saw that I made the change. It re-webpacked and rebundled, and everything is good. So now we can do that. And we, as I said, we see that showing up immediately. I also didn't have to resave inside of my web part at all. It just showed up and it was aware. So that's awesome. So now let's go ahead and let's see what that looks like as we want to actually display it in our web part. So this is just a standard out-of-the-box web part with content that we all are familiar with. So I'm going to go ahead and replace that with just a reference to that particular control and that function, because we want to go ahead and display that HTML. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. We see that has now kicked off the gulp task runner over here, and it's done. So now let's go ahead and take a look at what the results are. So I'll refresh my page here. I'm working within a tenant on my online workbench. And if I come here and just do a search on library, we see there's my library component. And when I load it, oh, what? SharePoint developer by day, superhero by night, Parker. Now, I'm not saying Parker is Batman, but I've never seen him and Batman in the room at the same time. So, you have to be the judge. But cool way here to develop your library components at the same time you're working with your web parts or extensions. And by the way, as you see stickers coming soon, I'm getting some of these made. If you like them, then feel free to let me know and I can send some out or send some at some events. But it's a really cool way. Now, where can you get help for library components? Let's go back over to our slides. Here is links to 2 library component documentations from Microsoft, both fantastic. And I will paste them here in the chat. You can access them there. There's an overview as well as a component tutorial, walks you through, shows you how to create them the whole way, explains some of that NPM link magic that I was referencing. And then also down below, there's some more SharePoint library component champions. I've been doing a lot of evangelizing on this. I really love library components, but Alex, Sergey, and Bartamon are all awesome guys in the community that are also doing a lot with library components. So definitely check them out. And we can do stuff together. So I just saw a question from Andu, curious to get an answer to what is so different about library component from NPM package. Okay, so the NPM package, where the NPM package is JS bundle is hosted in a CDN, other than it's hosted in SharePoint. Well, it's probably a longer story than just a quick answer. When you do an NPM import into that, it's going to I'm not sure what you mean, but when you say it's hosted in another, I know hosted outside of SharePoint, but when you do an import, obviously it's going to import that package into your solution.
So I can do it via voice if you want.
Sure.
So I guess what is the value that a library component adds over using an NPM package? Because in an NPM package, I can always just mark it as an external and point to an external JS bundle.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the benefits is that it's going to be hosted directly in your tenancy, right? So I guess you could also mark it as external and point it to maybe if that was, hosted in your, if you somehow hosted it in your SharePoint tenancy. But the SPFx is the library component is, what am I trying to say? Living in your SharePoint tenancy, right? So you're probably going to benefit from some performance there by having access to it. It's a little more controlled, I would say, right? So things that live externally, you may or may not be able to always control when and where or how they're going to be served up and if they change, whereas this is full control of that.
Okay.
I'm sure there's other benefits as well. And feel free to chime in, AC,
I guess I keep asking the question and I haven't gotten someone to really say nothing against library components. I'm just curious, why do we have a SharePoint ism for something that is already something that can be solved? Because if I own the NPM package and I publish the JavaScript bundle into my own CDN, or if I even publish it over to the Office 365 CDN, I still own everything. And so to me, I just am curious what is the value add over SharePoint? I get all the thing about that you can put it in different places, but if it's a SharePoint specific thing, you only can use it inside of SharePoint, where if it was an NPM package, you can get the exact same benefit and use it in any kind of a web-based project.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I guess some of the other things too is, as Tom brought out, it's bundled, right? So that's one of the benefits, I guess. And I'm sure you can bundle it with Webpack and any other kind of NPM import and package. I think the other thing that I enjoy, and again, you can do this as well in any, because really what's behind the scenes here is still just web dev stuff, but I like how I can also set it up to be optimized bundling, right? So combining all of those things together. and you can pull in just pieces of the library component, and you can customize the library component. Some of the other things that you can include into it is not just functionality, but things like SVGs or fonts, icon fonts, or images. And I guess that makes it nice to have it in one nice, neat little package. So theoretically, you could include an npm package in the library component, maybe not necessarily externally. I've just imported them so they're inside the library component. But I personally like the control there, and it's all within the guise of SharePoint in the tenancy and in a way that I control. And of course, again, you can do that in another way when you're pointing externally, but I just like how it's all neatly wrapped together within the different SharePoint tenancies and components and stuff like that.
Sure. I wasn't trying to challenge you. I was just trying to.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
My only point of the thing was just to see. There's multiple ways to, as they say, to skin the same cat. And so
Absolutely.
I'm just trying to see, is there, some people choose one way, but they choose another way. And by asking the question, I'm just trying to get someone to pin down here's the technical reason of why you would choose X over Y. That's all.
I would say that there's no real technical reason. How would I put this in a completely transparent way? The reason why we ship to library components, also for third party, is that we started using those internally at some point. Why do we use them internally? Is that we have a pretty massive code base. The SharePoint applications, we create applications, which is a concept which is available, which is not available third party, but they're huge. Our solution is massive. That's why we developed the Rush component, which Vartaman demoed in some of the calls. But one of the benefits of using the library components is that we can actually version everything in a one solution. And again, matter of opinion, matter of a approach. The key point to understand, like AC was saying as well, there's no right or wrong. People can come to these things and say, but what is the recommended approach? Well, it's really up to you. We use library components in our development heavily. As out-of-the-box SharePoint is being extended, or tenant admin UIs are being extended. Is that the right thing to do? Debatable, but it is more bundled as a one large package rather than versioning things separately. Again, it might be that you want to version things separately, and you want to version things separately in your CDN, and then you want to probably choose an alternative route. There's no right or wrong. There's multiple different options. And one of the things what AC said, which is a good thing to remember, library components is a SharePoint-ism. It is SharePoint specific thing. Library component as such is not being used outside of SharePoint. So it's something which we have introduced as part of our development cycle. So again, debatable. Whatever feels the most natural for your developers and for your development team, I would recommend using that, whatever it is. So.
Yeah, sometimes it just comes down to a matter of preference, right? What fits better into your organization's development model and
yes.
patterns and practices, no pun intended,
Totally.
that works for each person. So kind of tomato, both ways work, and both ways probably work well, but preference, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get past is it just a tabs versus spaces thing, which
yeah,
to me that's all it is. Which
yeah.
To me that is, and I'm not trying to downplay them or anything. I'm just trying to see if I haven't seen it. So that's all I was asking, and more than happy to get into have a debate on it too with you at some point in the future.
And just for the people who are actually hearing this discussion as well, you need to remember that AC is asking these questions because he wants you to hear the question and the answer. He's not asking this question because he might be wondering the options. So he has the facts. So trust me.
Yep. Vesa has heard this many times. So I was just doing it in public just to get somebody else's input. I wasn't trying to put David on the spot, but just trying to help.
We know each other. We're good.
But yeah, it is an important thing to have an open discussion and really understand the different options, and having resources shared in the chat window so people can make their own educated, let's say, decision on what model they actually want to use. So super important thing as well. Good. We do have 9 minutes. Was there any other things? There was a question related on list web part, out of the box list web part, when it will be supporting connections, dynamic data connections. If it's not doing that right now, I'm not sure if it's doing that, but apparently it isn't. It is definitely in the development. There has been some delays related on the list library experience because we're getting a lot of feedback that we need to improve that. And then that means that we will need to actually think the root implementation rather than concentrate just on the web part and potentially redesign and share some of the components. And that has slightly delayed some of the functionalities to be available, definitely in the progress of things. Also, not forgetting about thank you, David, and thank you, Ramin, for the great demos as well and good discussion. The feature to create a list based on another list is great when we will have the same for document libraries. I do not have an ETA on that. I think it's actually coming. It is slightly more complicated thing though to implement, and it is a separate implementation behind the scenes. So I can't be sure when it's coming, so I can't give an ETA. Good point from Bill Ayers. Good sign of this community is that we can have this kind of discussion without people going into defense. Yes. As a ex-consultant, as a let's say recovering consultant, one of the things what everybody needs to remember, things are not black and white. There's so many shades of gray on these things that it is a super important thing to remember. There's no such thing as best practices. Every single man's best practice depends and is objective. That's the thing. It depends on the team, it depends on the company, it depends on the objective, it depends on the skill level and understanding what is the best practice. So super important thing. Is comp task runner in SPFx incremental, checks only the files that are changed. Sometimes takes longer to build solution containing multiple web parts extensions. I think it's actually incremental, that's my understanding. But I can't actually confirm that. And really the build times are highly dependent on the solution structure. Now, like I said, we are building the native out-of-the-box SharePoint using SharePoint framework as well, which by the way is a good reminder for you that yes, this is a safe thing to bet on because the whole SharePoint is being built using exactly the same tooling and exactly the same technology. So in our case, really the solution is huge, and we are all the time now trying to optimize the development experience because it delays and slows down our internal development as well if there's a long build times on the solution. So, which is a good thing for everybody in the community as well. So everybody benefits. Anyone up for hurricanes? Yeah, I've been watching on that progress. So it was something starting with the letter of D. So it's the fourth storm which got a name. So it's going to be a long autumn. Ignite is on November. The hurricane season should be all done by then. I think 2 years ago we had a hurricane hitting Orlando 2 weeks before the Ignite, if I remember correctly.
Oh no, it can come in November. I wouldn't say that.
Fair point. Fair point. Sure, that's true. But was it like 2 years ago that it was like 2 weeks before Ignite, the hurricane went through Miami or something like that? If I remember correctly. It
went straight up the center of Florida. It was Hurricane Irma, and it was about 2 to 3 weeks before Ignite. That was in September.
Yeah. Which was then, there was a debate on are we going to cancel or not. So, but we didn't, and everything was fine. So you can't control Mother Nature. Good. Any other questions? We can talk about AC's preparedness for hurricanes. Absolutely. We don't luckily have those in Scandinavia, so but it gets insanely cold in here though. Any other questions? Ignite session catalog was, by the way, released. We will have a SharePoint framework sessions in Ignite. AC is having a few sessions. We have a few engineering sessions. We also have our community PnP session where we demonstrate all of the latest and greatest in the open source side of the house as well. We have pretty cool stuff queued up for Ignite. Time is running out, which is a pity, but we'll definitely have, if nothing else, insanely good smoke and mirrors demos, and then it's going to be truly functioning slightly later. That's how it works. You don't want to actually know. I should actually do it like 5 years after SBC 2018. How did we do certain demos explanation at some point? Because it is every now and then it's smoke and mirrors. now, but luckily all of the stuff what we demoed are then fully functioning slightly later, so that's absolutely fine. There are APIs to see if they have been applied. We talk about the site designs, yes, there. Can you share SPF sessions in the next call? Yes, we'll definitely go through the SPFx and SharePoint development sessions in the upcoming calls. That's a good reminder. I should have actually prep that in here. The schedule is not yet available, but the session names are already available, so sessions were selected. Are we planning to release SharePoint Framework 2.0 or 1.91? So 1.91 is already out. 1.10 is going to go out in September. We did have a slide around that one earlier today. The SharePoint Framework 2.0 is not really, well, we'll see if that's going to happen, or are we going to rename some of the framework areas, and how do we align to this larger thinking around what we want to do it with Office 365 in future. For now, you can expect that we'll have 1.10 in September, and then 1.11 in October, and then 1.12 in November. That would be the logical thing to happen. But basically, that's going to happen for now. And then if there's going to be additional announcements, those are going to be done in Ignite. So I can't disclose anything special now. Is a reusable control picker being considered? I think we actually have something in the pipeline, even as a pull request, if I remember from Hugo Bernier, related on the image picker file selection. I'm not quite sure where it is. One of the challenges what we're having in some of these controls and some of the demos what we're seeing also in the community are using controls and functionalities which we, as a Microsoft, we don't want people to use outside of our first-party web parts until we have actually been designed then to be used outside of first-party web parts. So we're still trying to figure out how do we do that for certain functionalities. I think the profile card is a good example. There's a nice profile card which can actually get into a use in your third-party web part, but it's not intended to be used there. And that's partly of the internal discussions and debates what we're having in engineering on for example, our team pushing heavily on other teams releasing these controls as reusable controls, but then for them it would be an additional burden to actually do that, because then if you start using those controls, they need to start thinking backward compatible versioning, which is an additional overhead for them to implement their first-party web parts. So it's an interesting, let's say, how would I put it, interesting ball game to figure out what are the things what we want third party to use, and what are the things which are aimed for first party, and what are how much we can actually do those differences, because we wouldn't like to have those differences, but still. So I think that's it. Any chance Microsoft can pre-create app catalog site collections whenever a new tenant is created? We've been debating on that for a long time, by the way. Good question from Gautam. It seems to be that we'll give you an API to make that happen, but we're not looking into recreating that beforehand, because it would have a storage impact, and the individual impact in the one site tenant is quite small, but when we talk about hundreds of millions of tenants, that sums up to be quite a huge storage impact. So all of that has a overall cost impact in our operations, and then that's the reason why we need to think through in scale as well. But anyway, that's it for this time. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Ramin. Thank you, David, for the great discussion. Thank you, AC, for the great discussion as well. It's good to have those discussions and also ask those hard questions, because that's how we learn, by going through those hard questions together as a community. That's a really, really valuable thing, even though that wasn't too hard. I know that AC has much harder questions on his backlog as well. But thank you everybody for joining. Thank you everybody for being active on the chat window. Great to see that we're getting back online. The chat is super active all the time. We're helping each other, and there's a lot of people in the call participating here. And we have growing activities in GitHub, and the usage is really off the roof. So thank you everybody for making that happen as well. But we'll come back. The next call, SPFx call, is in September 12th, so 2 weeks from now, because this happens bi-weekly on Thursday mornings in Pacific time, and then the next general SharePoint DevSig is on September 5th, so a week from now. Recording will be available in 24 hours. Thank you. Bye-bye.